My phone buzzed during dinner with our biggest client, a text from my new VP. Pack up Monday, we're streamlining. Services are no longer required. I tilted the screen toward our CEO and watched his face go cold. The shrimp fork was still in my hand when that eerie stillness hit. The kind you get right before a tornado rips your world apart. The ballroom was all marble echoes and gold medallions, where egos wore cufflinks and Chardonnay flowed like denial. I sat at table 7 next to Robert Kessler, CEO of Grenner Systems, a man whose handshake had once sealed a $90 million logistics deal. My dress was black and practical, signaling I wasn't there to impress, but to ensure their warehouses didn't collapse. Yet somehow, I already knew this would be my last company gala. See, I wasn't anyone special by title, just Ellen Hayes, operations liaison at Wallace & Bray. Sounds about as exciting as a tax seminar, right? But I was the name buried on page 42 of a 300-page defense contract, listed under Essential Continuity Personnel. Corporate called it a key person clause. I called it my invisible insurance policy, only noticeable when someone got stupid enough to shine a flashlight on it. And Jared Blake, our new VP of Operations, had just become that flashlight. I'd been with Wallace & Bray for 12 years, long enough to remember when the printer room had a fax machine and people still made eye contact. My job wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Every Tuesday, I held standing calls with Greenor's procurement team. Every Friday, I reviewed shipment redundancies, like a surgeon spotting tumors. Every month, I recalibrated performance benchmarks that saved millions and padded bonuses for executives who never knew my name. But Jared was new. 7 months new. He wore loafers without socks and called women over 40 tribal knowledge assets. Silicon Valley code for, we'd fire you if HR had the stomach. He looked at me and saw a salary line he could delete. Never asked who wrote the service level agreements. Never wondered who brokered the original deal with Grenor after their last contractor misrouted 200 fuel cells to Fresno instead of Phoenix. The last few months had been a slow bleed. Cheryl from finance gone. Ramon from systems. Restructured. My Slack permissions vanished one tool at a time. The Friday donut order mysteriously shrank by 2 boxes. It was corporate gaslighting at its finest, the kind you don't notice until your badge stops beeping and nobody asks why. So I'd printed the contract, not the summary, the whole damn thing. I highlighted Clause 17.4 in yellow and slipped it into my tote bag, waiting for someone dumb enough to dance on the landmine. But here's what Jared didn't know about Ellen Hayes, the legacy employee he was about to discard. I held a master's degree in supply chain management from Northwestern, earned while working full-time and raising my nephew after my sister's accident. Over 12 years, I'd personally negotiated deals worth $1.2 billion in total value. I spoke fluent Spanish and enough Mandarin to navigate shipping delays in Shanghai. My annual salary was $95,000, but performance bonuses pushed my total compensation to $140,000 last year. More importantly, I owned my house in Arlington outright, paid off early using bonuses from deals Jared would never understand. I had $85,000 in savings, another $120,000 in retirement accounts, and 0 debt. I wasn't some desperate employee who'd beg for scraps. My professional network was worth more than most companies' entire client databases. Robert Kessler trusted me with Grenner's most sensitive logistics because I'd saved them during a supplier crisis in 2019. Working 72 hours straight to prevent a $50 million production shutdown. Patricia Voss from Hartman Industries had me on speed dial because I understood aerospace compliance regulations better than lawyers half my age. When Kumar Technologies needed someone to navigate FDA red tape for their medical device shipments, they called me directly, not Wallace & Bray. Most crucially, I'd learned to protect myself. Every major contract I'd negotiated in the past 5 years included key person clauses, not from arrogance, but from experience. In relationship-based business, trust isn't transferable. Clients didn't just buy Wallace & Bray's services. They bought access to my expertise, my connections, and my personal guarantee that their critical shipments wouldn't end up in warehouse purgatory. The Grenner contract was my masterpiece. Clause 17.4 stated in crystal-clear legal language that if Ellen Hayes ceased employment with Wallace & Bray for any reason during the contract's first 2 years, Grenner had the right to immediate termination with full refund of prepayments. More devastating for Wallace & Bray, they'd retain rights to my proprietary logistics optimization system that the company had been planning to license for millions in additional revenue. That clause existed because of a disaster in 2010, when our previous project manager ghosted mid-contract, leaving Grenner weeks from a shipping catastrophe that would have cost them a Pentagon bid. After that nightmare, they insisted anyone critical to operations be contractually cemented. Legal had added my name because, as the general counsel said, Ellen's the only adult in this entire building. The contract was never amended, not once in 12 years. My name sat there in black ink, witnessed and notarized, a legal time bomb waiting for someone arrogant enough to pull the pin. Across the ballroom, Jared held court with junior executives and consultants, all teeth and hair gel, gesturing like he was coaching a startup through a TED audition. He never looked my way, not once. It was like I'd already been deleted, someone pressing backspace on my legacy while the cursor blinked where my name used to be. That's when my clutch buzzed. I don't check phones during client dinners. It's one of my rules, but something about the vibration felt insistent, like it knew. Jared B. Pack up Monday, we're streamlining. Services are no longer required. No greeting, no punctuation, not even my name. Just services, like I was a vending machine with an expired warranty. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. There was no cinematic gasp or shattered wine glass, just stillness, the kind that comes when a blade finally exits skin after years of pressure. I looked at the message for 3 seconds, took a breath through my nose, then without turning my head, tilted the screen toward Kessler. He was swirling bourbon in his glass, mid-conversation about supplier chain reforms. He paused, read the message once, then again. His eyes didn't widen. His expression didn't change. He just set the glass down on white linen, folded his napkin once, and leaned in like he was discussing freight capacity. "Do you remember Clause 17.4? He asked, voice low and deadly smooth. I nodded. He pulled out his phone, some matte black model that probably doubled as a satellite transponder, began typing with deliberate precision, 2 thumbs, no urgency, no typos. Then he showed me the screen. To Jared B., I believe you just terminated our master service agreement as well. See you in court. He didn't press send immediately, just looked at me, that question lingering in the air like smoke. Are you sure you want this? I didn't smile, didn't blink, just nodded again, barely more than a tilt. He sent the message. In that moment, a new silence was born. Not awkward silence or ceremonial hush, but silence with gravity. Silence with consequences. Somewhere across the ballroom, Jared's phone buzzed in his jacket. He didn't check it right away, too busy laughing at his own story, surrounded by people who didn't know the floor had just collapsed beneath him. Kessler turned back to his plate like nothing happened, took another sip of bourbon, picked up his fork. I went back to eating overpriced beef that somehow tasted like victory. There was no panic in me, no rage, just cold completion, like watching a missile finally leave the silo after years underground. It wasn't revenge. It was protocol. Jared thought he was streamlining. What he'd actually done was detonate a legal landmine, crafted by people who understood that continuity wasn't a buzzword, it was a contract, and he'd just violated it. Around the room, people kept chatting and toasting, but I felt the shift like wind changing before a storm. Jared finally looked at his phone. His face didn't crack immediately, but his jaw ticked. He stepped away from his circle toward the lobby, moving quickly without his usual swagger. Kessler smiled at the dessert menu. "They're doing creme brulee tonight," he said casually. "They always burn it," I replied. He grinned. "Not the only thing getting torched tonight." The creme brulee was burned, of course, but I ate every bite like I was spooning justice from a sugar-crusted coffin. Jared never returned to his seat. His chair sat there like a question mark with no answer, napkin folded, wine untouched. From across the ballroom, I'd watched him read Kessler's text. His jaw clenched so tight his skull probably creaked. Then he stood abruptly and disappeared into the lobby shadows, like a man realizing mid-dance that his shoelaces were tied together. The rest of the gala played out like a string quartet on the Titanic. Waiters poured coffee, speeches dragged on, but underneath it all you could feel the shift. Something had gone off. Phones began buzzing more than usual. Someone from PR whispered too loudly to the CFO. And me? I sat there like a woman at her own wake, composed and calculating, because I knew Grenor's legal team didn't need calendar invites to start moving. Those people were corporate piranhas who treated weekends like combat zones. By Saturday morning, they'd be digging through archived emails, past amendments, call logs, renewal terms. Sunday evening, someone in our finance department would text me a screenshot of a Slack message. "Who approved removing the clause holder?" No one would reply because no one had approved anything. Jared had acted unilaterally, and corporate America was about to teach him why you don't fire people without reading their contracts first. Monday arrived like a hangover, loud, cruel, and full of consequences. I showed up at sharp, hair neat, blazer pressed, contract copy still folded in my tote bag. The receptionist wouldn't make eye contact. That's when I knew it was over. By Mark from facilities appeared at my cubicle with a cardboard box, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Hey, Ellen," he mumbled, "I was told to help you collect your things." "No need," I said, pulling out the small box I kept for seasonal decorations. "I travel light." I packed my charger, a stress ball shaped like a shipping container, one photo of my nephew. Nothing else. Let them keep their participation trophies and corporate tchotchkes. At the security desk, I removed my badge and slid it across the counter. The guard looked confused. "They said someone would walk you out." "No need," I repeated, heading for the door. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Kessler. "Sit tight. This gets fun." 6 words with the casual menace of a trigger warning. By lunchtime, whispers were leaking from Grenor's vendor relations team. The termination was flagged. Internal compliance was raising concerns. An email chain surfaced showing Jared had made unilateral staffing changes without consulting legal, violating terms of engagement for a Tier 1 contractor. I didn't need to lift a finger. All I had to do was not interrupt the machine while it chewed through him. By Tuesday morning, Wallace & Bray's lawyers had entered the first stage of corporate grief, denial with white-knuckled panic. They sent a memo claiming Clause 17.4 was contextual and non-binding under current operational frameworks. They even suggested the wording was outdated, that personal referencing was no longer central to service delivery. Here's the kicker. My name wasn't scribbled in margins. It was etched in bold type with timestamps and initials from 3 executives, including the retired general counsel who used to call me the only functioning adult in this asylum. Unlike the contracts Jared skimmed between reps on his standing desk treadmill, this one was never amended, not once, not in 12 years. Grenor's reply was swift, 1 sentence, 14 words. Your firm has breached contract terms. Formal complaint and damages request incoming. By noon, the lawsuit was filed. Not threatened, filed. The number hit like a tactical nuke. $38 million in immediate projected losses, government penalties, and potential delays in 5 military supply chains due to severed continuity. But it wasn't just the dollar amount. It was that the breach was so stupidly preventable, so embarrassingly reckless, that PR couldn't spin it. The firm's general counsel reportedly slammed a binder across conference tables and muttered, "You fired the clause holder?" Like he'd discovered someone accidentally donated the company's credit line to a fake charity. Internal audits began within hours. HR logs were pulled. Email trails were scrubbed. Slack channels went read-only. Everyone was digging for someone, anyone, who could claim they'd signed off on my termination. They found no one, because there was no one. Jared, in all his sockless glory, had acted unilaterally. No legal review, no leadership sign-off, no due diligence, just vibes and arrogance. He tried damage control, sending an all-hands email claiming the clause had aged out, and he was fully empowered to make strategic personnel decisions aligned with post-pandemic restructuring goals. But HR wasn't buying it. Legal wasn't buying it, and the board wasn't just refusing to buy it. They were sharpening knives. A week later, an internal email leaked, 4 words in the subject line. Who approved firing Ellen? The thread had no replies, not even, let me check, just executives quietly choking on their own negligence. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch with tea, watching squirrels demolish my bird feeder while Grenner's legal team systematically dismantled every excuse Wallace and Bray offered. By Friday, the firm's stock dropped 6 points. By Monday, their biggest West Coast client canceled a renewal. Someone in communications called it an unfortunate misalignment of internal protocols, which is corporate speak for, we hit ourselves in the face with a rake. Jared's LinkedIn went silent. His last update, excited to lead our next phase of growth, now floated above a battlefield he'd unknowingly started. He wasn't just fired, he was professionally radioactive. The board meeting minutes leaked eventually. One member asked, dead serious. How do you accidentally fire someone named in a federal continuity clause? Jared tried framing it as miscommunication between HR and operations, throwing around phrases like fluid restructuring climate and alignment friction. It didn't land. Not with every C-level executive staring at a printed contract with my name highlighted in corporate yellow. They placed him on administrative leave, HR's version of slowly rolling someone in bubble wrap before tossing them off the roof. His office was emptied overnight, parking badge deactivated. They didn't even let him send a goodbye Slack. The general counsel, realizing his name appeared on too many CC'd threads and too few action items, resigned before sunrise. No announcement, just vanished. His assistant said he decided to refocus on family, which is what you say when your inbox becomes evidence. 3 weeks after that gala dinner, an embossed envelope arrived by courier. Navy folder, silver Grenner logo, thick cardstock inside. Lunch, I treat, just us, RK. I met Kessler at a small bistro we'd used for logistics summits years ago. He was already there with iced tea and a spiral notebook. No laptop, no lawyers, no corporate theater. Ellen, he said, standing to shake hands like we were sealing a pact. You look unbothered. I'm getting good at it. We didn't talk about Wallace and Bray immediately. He asked about my nephew, my garden, whether I still made those sweet potato biscuits I used to bring to supplier meetings. I asked if his warehouse team ever fixed the pallet tracking software I'd warned would fail during leap years. Eventually, he leaned forward. I'm offering you a position, Director of Operational Continuity. You define the role, set the scope, choose your hours. I don't want theater, I want stability. The folder he slid across contained 6 pages of clean contract language and a salary that made me blink twice. Not just generous, respectful. What happened to your current Director of Continuity? I asked. He smirked. We were hoping to invent the role with you. I reached into my bag and pulled out the old Grenor contract, still folded on page 42, laid it flat between us and tapped clause 17.4. Keep this, I said, just in case your next VP learns to read. He nodded like I'd handed him a family heirloom. I flipped to the offer sheet, grabbed his pen, and crossed out one line. 2 conditions. First, I don't want legacy anywhere in my title. I'm not a ghost you dust off when systems fail. Done. Second, I pick my own successor when the time comes. He blinked, then grinned. I didn't expect you to be thinking that far ahead. I always do. We didn't toast or make dramatic signatures. Just a deal made in daylight between two people who understood what silence cost. 6 months later, Wallace & Bray officially collapsed. Wall Street Journal buried the news in paragraph 3 of a vendor mismanagement piece. But the damage was quantified. $380 million in long-term losses after factoring in government audits, canceled aerospace bids, and 3 major clients quietly reviewing partnership terms. Jared's professional obituary was written in LinkedIn, silence and empty networking events where his name became a cautionary tale whispered between handshakes. And me? I spent mornings on my porch reading books I'd never found time for, drinking coffee that wasn't reheated between crisis calls. My new Grenner contract didn't include punch cards or performance reviews, just a clear directive to keep them standing. One afternoon, a brown package arrived with no return address. Inside, a black walnut frame containing the original Wallace & Bray contract. Page 42 facing out. Clause 17.4 highlighted in faded yellow. My name still legible, still standing. I set it on my porch table, poured a second glass of wine, and leaned back in my chair. The breeze was soft, the silence clean. I thought not of revenge or fury, but of this simple truth. They should have asked who the key person was before pulling the trigger. Sometimes the best victories aren't planned. Sometimes you just have to step aside and let arrogance meet consequence in a marble ballroom, then watch the avalanche bury everyone who thought contracts were just paper instead of promises written in corporate stone.